I'm joined now by Peter Kendall, the president of the NFU in England and Wales, and by Philippe Legrain, the former special advisor at the World Trade Organization and author of a book on globalisation. So, Peter Kendall, Hilary Benn is both saying we must make British production secure, but we have to increase global production. Does that make you feel happier?
And what I'm really pleased about is that DEFRA and the Secretary of State have actually identified that food production is important. We've had a series of governments who have looked at the problems British agriculture has had, whether it's foot and mouth in 2001, whether it was BSE in the 90s. And there was a view within government that actually we were a rich country and we could just afford to buy food from wherever we wanted, whenever we wanted.
I don't get this though, Philippe Legrain. So basically, if Peter Kendall is a pork producer, but pork production is cheaper abroad, do we buy from abroad or do we buy Peter Kendall's pork now?
Well, I think we should be buying pork from abroad. I mean, you mentioned an element of protectionism, and there's more than an element, there's a hell of a lot. There's the Common Agricultural Policy, which costs nearly £50 billion a year overall. That works out at £380 a year for every British family. Now, that's a hell of a lot of money. On top of that, you have import taxes, which average 20 to 30%, even higher on things like dairy and beef, which means that the price that you're paying is much higher because of protectionism.
And Peter Kendall, presumably, if there's a kind of slant towards British production, which clearly Hilary Benn wants, buy British, which has kind of various connotations, the inevitable result of that will be eventually that your prices will go up.
Well, what I'm nervous about is why Philip says we should buy pork from abroad. What I want is our sector in the UK, the pig producers here, to be as efficient and as competitive as anyone else in Europe, and even strive to be as efficient as actually people producing it at the other side of the world, and then all those add-on costs of shipping it and packaging it and presenting it here. I want the government to help my producers to be as efficient and as competitive.
Philip,
I'm not looking for subsidy.
I'm perfectly happy to buy British pork. I think we should have a free choice about whether we buy British pork, Brazilian pork, or pork from other countries. The point is that we ought to have the choice. Now, I also think we ought to make the connection between the fact that Britain is a rich and densely populated country, and therefore land is very expensive. That means it's not only expensive to grow things here and to raise cattle and so on, livestock here. It also means that farmers have an incentive to economise on land, to farm ever more intensively, and to squeeze their livestock into cramped spaces, and that leads to all kinds of problems, whether it's animal welfare or whether it's food safety problems.
And now you're being asked to produce more food with less fertiliser, less water, less energy.
Well, I think that's the challenge we face. We know the FAO figures, they're talking about having to double agricultural production by 2050, increase production by 50% by 2030. We know we've all got to do more. And I think the problem, the issue I take out with Philip is why do we want to depend on other parts of the world? We saw in the
Hilary Benn wants, he wants more global production as well.
I understand why we want food security by having the ability to trade, but what we should have learned from 2007-8 when we had those food price spikes was the amount of protectionism that kicked off around the world. 42 countries put protection measures in place. Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia banned exports of grain, and even now Russia and Kazakhstan are talking about forming an OPEC to control grain exports around the world. Why do we want to be dependent? I'm not talking about protectionism, I'm not talking about subsidy. I want to have capacity to produce here and to invest in that capacity.
Are you in favour of getting rid of the Common Agricultural Policy and the subsidies and import taxes that go with it?
I'm in favour of getting rid of distorting global trade. We have a Common Agricultural Policy that has changed beyond belief.
Well, the answer to that is no, then. You're not actually in favour of getting rid of it.
I'm talking about a Common Agricultural Policy that evolves over time. This view that a Common Agricultural Policy is trade distorting and locked in time is not correct.
If you look at the amount of countries, for example, that huge, the astonishing list of different countries that own huge tracts of land so that they can grow grain then to be sending on their food miles. Is this the battleground of the 21st century?
I think we could import a hell of lot of our food from Brazil. Brazil has 60 million hectares of land currently in cultivation, another 90 million hectares miles away from the Amazon of arable land which could be cultivated. They are now one of the leading exports of beef, of pork, of soybeans, of orange juice. We could import nearly everything we need from Brazil at much lower cost. It would be better for the environment because they don't need to keep cows in heated barns over the winter. They don't have to put things in greenhouses.
So you say that farming in Britain would be a thing of the past?
I think what would remain would be what people want to consume when they have a free choice, and what Britain is particularly good at.
Thank you both very much.